This is a line from, I don't know if it was from your book or from your updated book. The pandemic was a stealth biological weapons attack on the U.S. Is
Right.
that really your contention?
So it is. And here we take the story forward from February of 2020, when it was clear it came from the lab. What we have learned since, of course, is that the NIH and the Pentagon was funding gain of function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. We had actually trained people like the head of the Wuhan P4 lab, the high containment lab, the P4 lab, Dr. Shizhong Li. We had trained her at the University of North Carolina and at the Galveston labs run by the University of Texas. So we trained her in how to do the gain of function research to make existing viruses, coronaviruses in this case, more infectious and deadly. And we also know that the PLA bioweapons program was in part being carried out at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. It was part and parcel of the larger program that was run by a major general by the name of Major General Chun. Her full name is Chun Wei. And Major General Chun Wei said in 2017 about the bioweapons program, we need to develop a spear before we can develop a shield. What was she referring to? Well, the spear is a coronavirus that is more infectious and more deadly. And the shield is a vaccine. Well, if you look at the coronavirus backbone, it clearly has artificial insertions. I have an advanced degree in biology before I went into cynology. There are insertions to make it more infectious. So it's obviously genetically engineered. How did it get out of the lab? Now, my speculation, and this is speculation because there are a couple different ways this could have gone. My thought is that they were doing vaccine trials in Wuhan to try to develop the shield because they already had the spear, all right? So they're trying to develop the shield, an effective vaccine, and it was an ineffective vaccine. The virus leaked out. Once they had a pandemic on their hands, an epidemic on their hands in Wuhan, then the leadership of the Communist Party quite clearly, everyone agrees with this, decided to spread it around the world. They allowed planes filled with people who were infected to go to Italy and to Spain.
So in other words, just to stay on that point, whereas they were shutting down Wuhan, telling people stay at home, right? Are you saying that at the same time they were telling people to stay at home, they were nonetheless allowing people to depart the country?
Yes. There were planes that were, flights were banned within China, say from Wuhan to Beijing, and they were allowed to fly from Wuhan to other countries, including the United States. So it's clear that we have a pandemic that originally was covered up by the Chinese Communist Party for as long as it could be covered up. And during the course of that cover up, which was aided, by the way, by the World Health Organization, which claimed early on there was no human to human transmission. Well, if there's no human to human transmission, we really don't have to worry about it as much. There was human to human transmission. The Chinese communists were lying about that, and the WHO picked up that lie and helped to disseminate it. So we know that it was spread deliberately. We know that it was created in the lab. The only question is, how did it get out of the lab? And there are also reports, and I don't rule this out either, that at the World Military Games that were held in Wuhan, that famous city now that everyone knows about, in October of 2019, from October 17th to October 24th of 2019, World Military Games, 8,000 athletes came to Wuhan. Some of them came back sick. Some French athletes, German athletes, Canadian athletes came back with a cold, with the virus, with the flu. We didn't know what that was at the time. Was that the first outbreak of the coronavirus? Was it spread at the World Military Games? Should we be concerned about the upcoming Winter Olympics in Beijing for the same reason?
So what pushes you in the direction of it being a biological weapon as opposed to it being experimenting with different viruses so that we're prepared if we need to, if one needs?
That's a very interesting question. And the short answer is the People's Liberation Army's involvement convinces me that it's a bioweapon, because the People's Liberation Army is obviously not interested in advancing the frontiers of scientific knowledge in a general sense. They're interested in developing bioweapons. And we know now from reading the Chinese strategic literature that this has been a goal for a number of years. So Now, I'm willing to grant that Dr. Anthony Fauci and a number of naive biologists in the United States were simply trying to advance the frontiers of knowledge. They were advocates, and Fauci particularly was a great advocate of gain-of-function research because he argued that we needed to create superbugs in the lab. We needed to genetically enhance, using gain-of-function techniques, coronaviruses and other viruses, bacteria in the lab to become more infectious and deadly, so we could then develop therapeutics and vaccines to defeat them in order to, when the next bug came from nature, when the next virus jumped from a bat to a human, we would be ready with therapeutics and vaccines that we could develop quickly. Now, I understand that argument, but a lot of people, including a lot of virologists, immunologists, and scientists in the United States, said, wait a minute, Dr. Fauci, this is very dangerous research. There are lab leaks all the time from P2, P3, P4 labs. We shouldn't be developing superbugs in the lab. What if it leaks out? And so we put a moratorium on that research. We stopped it in 2014. Well, Dr. Anthony Fauci went looking elsewhere for a country which would be willing to continue doing that research. And he looked elsewhere for an organization through which he could pass the funds to support it. And he found that organization in EcoHealth Alliance, the head of which is Peter Daszak, who was funding, using money from Fauci, NIH, well, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease is Fauci's shop at the NIH. He has an annual budget of $6.1 billion. You wonder why virologists are not willing to cross him. They get a lot of their research funds from Dr. Anthony Fauci and have for decades.
And that is a government institution.
It's a government, it's part of the National Institutes of Health. And his particular area is the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. $6 billion, $6,000 million to give out in research grants every year and to carry out research in his own shop. So he sent money to EcoHealth Alliance, which then funded the research of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Now, China was happy to receive the funding, of course. They were happy to receive the technology so they could do gain-of-function research. But I would argue their purpose in doing the gain-of-function research was far different from what Fauci had envisioned. They were working on bioweapons, and specifically, they were working on what we have come to call unrestricted bioweapons, which are bioweapons that are, when you normally think of a bioweapon, you think of something like Ebola, right? Or anthrax, that when you spread it throughout a population, people die quickly and painfully. This is different. This is highly infectious, low lethality, and it has plausible deniability. That is to say, it spreads quickly, doesn't kill everybody that it infects, and it can be denied by the country that originated it. And if you think about it, that's precisely the profile that the coronavirus, the novel coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2 fits. It is an unrestricted bioweapon, highly infectious, not very lethal. And of course, China's been denying from the get-go that it had anything to do with its origins, when quite clearly it did.
But if it's a bioweapon, it's not a terribly effective bioweapon. Yeah, it gets you sick and old people die, but as far as really taking over a population, it doesn't really do that.
That's right. It doesn't fit the traditional image we have of a bioweapon of killing lots of people quickly.
Right. So what would be the intent behind this type of bioweapon?
Has it been effective? Well, think about it. It has put in the Oval Office the Chinese Communist Party's preferred presidential candidate, Joe Biden. So that's a victory. It has caused trillions of dollars in economic damage to the U.S. economy. That's a victory. It set back China's principal international competitor. It has resulted in some deaths, mostly those of the elderly and infirm and those with pre-existing conditions, to be sure. So it has had a tremendous effect. And I'm afraid, quite frankly, that if we don't call China to account for releasing a deadly virus on the world this time, if we don't demand reparations or impose penalties and costs on China for releasing a deadly virus on the world, then they will do it again at some point in the future.
Thank you again to our guest, Stephen Mosher. You can check out his book, Bully of Asia, Why China's Dream is the New Threat to World Order. Thanks to our producer, Michael Parker. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of The Hidden Truth Show.
Thank you for listening to The Hidden Truth Show with Jim Breslow. You can find us at hiddentruthshow.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hidden Truth Show. Join us again next week for another episode of Hidden Truth Show with Jim Breslow.